This is lesson 6 for course 1, fractional parts. So what we're looking at is we're looking at fractions and a little bit of a review on them, and then we're going to look at fractions of numbers. So to start off with, this is a fraction. It has a numerator and a denominator. The numerator tells you how many pieces you are looking at. The denominator tells you how many pieces there are altogether. So in this example, I have 2 pieces altogether. I am looking at one of the pieces. That's my numerator. So my numerator is 1. I'm looking at 1 piece. My denominator is 2. There are 2 pieces altogether. That is a proper fraction. Fractions are also used when you are, for example, having numbers. So if I have the number 3 and I want to half it, okay, what I need to do is I have, let's say, my 3 dots, and I am halving it. That means if you see down here, one of these dots has been split in half, which means I have 2 pieces altogether, 1 piece that I'm looking at for either side, because 1 piece is on either side. So I would have 1 and a half, 1 and a half, whoops, would be half of 3. So half of 3 is 1 and a half. That is how I figure that out. Now, if I have a larger number that I'm trying to find the fraction of, so let's say 450, and I want half of 450, what I do is I take 450 and I divide it by here, by this denominator. Now, the reason I divide by the denominator is because when you divide, remember from previous lessons, you're taking this number and you're putting it into this many groups. And then your quotient will be how many things are in each group. This tells me how many groups. Okay, that's what this tells me. How many groups am I putting it into? Which is, in our case, the same as how many groups do I have altogether, or how many pieces do I have altogether? Okay, so if I had, again, let's draw our half. If I had this, and I'm translating this into this, I'm saying how many of 450 is going to be on either side in either piece. That's why we're dividing by 2. So we're going to divide by 2. So 2 goes into 4 twice. 2 times 2 is 4. Subtract equals 0. Bring down the 5. 2 goes into 5 twice, which is 4, because 2 times 2 is 4. Subtract equals 1. Bring down the 0. We now have 2 goes into 10 5 times, which is 2 times 5 is 10. Subtract equals 0. There is my division done. I now know that half of 450 is 225. So again, if we're looking at this as a fraction again, and there's my fraction, I would have 225 on each side. Let's look at another one. Let's look at 1/3 of 450. Okay, now, same thing that we did for a half, we are doing for a third. Okay, so we're going to take 450 and we're going to divide it by the denominator, by 3. Because if we had a piece, we have our 3 equal groups, we are taking 450 and saying how much of 450 would be in each piece of my 3 groups. Okay, so 3 goes into 4 once. 3 times 1 is 3. Take away equals 1. Bring down the 5. 3 goes into 15 5 times. 3 times 5 is 15. Subtract equals 0. Bring down the 0. 3 goes into 0 0 times. So we get 150. I would have 150 in each section. Now, I can also check my math if I want to at this point, because I can check and say, okay, well, if 450 divided by 3 is 150, that means 150 plus 150 plus 150 should be 450. That's a good way that you can check these, is you can just add them all together. We'll do one more as an example. Let's find 1/5 of $4.50. Now, even though this is money, you're still doing the same thing. You are still 450 or $4.50 divided by the denominator, which is 5, because you will now have 5 groups you are putting 450 into, or $4.50. So 5 goes into 4 0 times. And this is where I bring my decimal up, which is 0. And I could do all that if I want, but I'm just going to keep going. 5 goes into 45 9 times, which is 45. Subtract equals 0. 5 goes into 0 0 times. I now get 90 cents. Goes into each of my 5 pieces. All right, last thing we're going to look at is just shading a figure. So if I have this figure, and I ask you to shade 1/3 of that figure. Now, if you notice, there are not 3 pieces to this figure, okay? Remember, this is how many pieces you have altogether. Now, this figure has 6 pieces, but we can still shade 1/3 of this piece. What I do then is I look at this piece, and I have to mentally split it into 3 sections. And if you notice, 1, 2, that makes 1, 2, 3 sections if I ignore this middle line. So to shade 1/3, I would shade this section. Okay, now if you had this figure and you wanted to shade 1/3 and you'd forgotten that you can do 1, 2, 3 and visually section it out into 3 pieces, what you can do instead is you have the same diagram, and you are going to look at it. This is now 6 is how many pieces I have altogether. So I need to figure out what is the equivalent, what is the same fraction if I have 1/3, if I need to find the same fraction with 6 as my denominator. I can do that by saying, well, 6 is 3 times 2. So if I do something to the bottom number, my denominator, I have to do it to my top number, my numerator. So I would do 1 times 2, which gets me 2. And I would shade in 2/6. 1, 2. And you now have 1/3. Now, I could continue, and if I want to say I want to shade in 2/6, but I want to be fun about it, I could even do this if I wanted to. That is still 1/3 of this shape shaded. I just haven't put my shaded pieces together. So that is Fractional Parts, Lesson 6, Course 1.